What I'm going to show now are some of the pictures. I showed these pictures for Ashes when they were here because I wanted to talk a bit about World War II in Bohemia. This was the public school that burned in, what was it, 1977, on the corner of Smithtown Avenue and Church Street. This is the war ended in 1945. In May of 1945, the Germans surrendered. Then August 6th, we dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima, and August 9th on Nagasaki, and on August 14th, the Japanese surrendered. But during the war, the years we were in it, from December 1st, 1971, to the end of the war in August of 1945, everybody really was taken up in the war in some way. Everybody had something to do. I mentioned that it was the last war in which everybody was touched by what was going on. All the wars we've fought since then have been mainly men and women who are volunteers. We haven't really felt it so hard at home, the things they had to give up. This was the last time that we had a war in which everybody took part. Up in this part of the public school was a room. It was before the days when radar was either fully set out or there just wasn't enough of it around. So every town, and this would have been true no matter what town you lived in, had an area for spotters, airplane spotters. And there usually would be two people in that room. You had to watch and listen for airplanes. And you had to report them into a central place. If you've ever seen these movies where they have a big table of the Second World War and they're moving with sticks, they're moving planes or boats around on it, I imagine that's what they were doing. What happened here is you would call in, the code name here was Florence 30. You called in Florence 30, let them know that this was Bohemia reporting, and then you had to tell. There was a chart, and you just had to read off in order. Did you see or hear the plane? So you said seen or heard. If you saw it, was it one engine or two engines or four engines? Which direction was it heading in? And you passed off. And then, presumably, whatever direction it was heading, if it was heading south, let's say, it would be picked up then in Sayville or Oakdale or West Sayville. And in that way, planes flying around would be tagged. And I just watched the program on TV last night, which I didn't realize, about how many ships were sunk here off Long Island, off the coast of the United States during the Second World War. We didn't realize how much damage the Germans were doing. They were able to come here and sink a lot of shipping. So it was important to keep track of the airplanes and what was happening, because the war plants, the airplane war plants, were in Bethpage and Farmingdale, which were 25, 30 miles to the west of here. These are ration coupons. It's something, again, that we haven't had since then. These were gasoline coupons. You got gasoline coupons depending upon how important the work you were doing was. So it was A, B, C. I don't know if there was a D. I remember A, B, and C. A was the least important. C was gave you the opportunity for the most gas. This was my father's. He worked in the war plant, in one of the war plants in Farmingdale. It wasn't only gasoline that was rationed. Those of you who were around in those days, who would have been children, remember that meat was rationed. You got coupons for meat. When you went to the butcher shop, you had to give a certain number of coupons. You got coupons depending upon the number of people in the family. It was very hard to get things like cooking oil, like Crisco or Mazzola, or those things that you cooked with. So much was rationed. And also, you had to save a lot of stuff, recycle things. I remember in school, when we used up toothpaste tubes at home, after you squeezed them all out, you brought them to school and put them in a container they had. Tin cans, you took the paper off the tin cans and flattened the tin cans and brought them in also. Paper was collected. Paper was newspaper and cardboard, and it was very, very valuable. A lot of groups, like Boy Scouts and others, raised money because you got $50 a ton for newspaper in those days, in the 1940s. That would be $700 today. And you could collect a ton of newspapers very quickly. And a lot of the folks might remember going around with wagons from house to house and picking up newspaper and bringing it to wherever the group, the organization, was storing the paper. This picture is familiar. It's over on the wall over there. It's Frank Karshik, one of the old timers in town, and it's farming. And the reason for the picture is to talk about the victory gardens. One of the big issues, or one of the big projects of the Second World War, was to have as many people as could grow food at home. Now, there was nothing new for Bohemia. A lot of the folks came from farming backgrounds. Everybody had a fairly decent piece of property. Most people did. People would have at least an acre, sometimes 2 acres. And most people were used to growing things, to growing potatoes and tomatoes and cabbage and string beans and corn, and then to preserving it. One of the big accomplishments of the United States during the Second World War was not only to feed itself, but to feed so many other countries in the world, because Americans at home were growing their own food and the farmers were doing a tremendous job elsewhere. But growing and preserving food was a long tradition. This is Carl Johnson. He was the first of the Americans killed in the Second World War. He was killed at Pearl Harbor. He and his family lived on Moscow Avenue. Moscow Avenue was now Johnson Avenue. The avenue was changed to be named after him. It's hard to know exactly whether that was in Bohemia or Wcela. His mother belonged to the groups in both towns, but both towns claimed him as one of their heroes who died again at the very beginning of World War II, December 7th. Another of the Americans who was killed in the war. There were 118 young men and women who served in the Second World War, from a population of about 700. So almost 1/5 of the population served in the war. This is Arkad Cherny. He belonged to the bakery family. The bakery still stands on the corner of Smithtown and Collar Street. He was killed on D-Day, on the invasion of Normandy in June 1944. It wasn't only the men who served in the war, but the women served in the war too. There were the WAFs, the Women's Auxiliary Force. There was the Waves, which was a Navy group. There were the WASPs and they were women who flew airplanes. They didn't fly airplanes in combat, but a lot of the planes had to be transported in the United States from one place to another, and so women were pilots, as well as, of course, famous Rosie the Riveter. The women went to work in war plants also. This was an entertainment in the hall at St. John's, the original St. John's School, which burned down in 1957. But the reason I have the picture is that 3 of the young women here served in the war. The 2 girls at the end are twins. The Ruth twins, Gladys and Elaine, I don't know which is which. Their mother was the postmaster in Bohemia for a good number of years. So they both served as nurses. And the young woman in the middle, Livan Yanda, she served in the Waves during the war. It's hard to recognize all those people, but a lot of them are folks who you would know. I think that's Faye Pales, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is.
And Justine Valley is in there someplace. I think that's Justine. They're not too clear. Minnie Herbeck, a lot of other people who were also part of the society. This was the first memorial it was, while the war was still going on, this board was put up outside that had the names of all those who were serving in the service. And I think that's Bill Stuckel and Mr. Senior Bill Stuckel. And this was the war memorial after the First World War that was on the grounds of the public school. This is showing that World War I memorial by itself. Again, that was when they were still putting postcards out, as you see, World War Monument, Bohemia, New York. This was the day of the dedication of the war memorial, and at it were there's the father of one of the men who was killed. There's Mrs. Johnson, the mother of Carl Johnson, whom we saw a minute ago. There's the mother of another. There's the mother of Salrada, and that's Mrs. Wish. She's the wife of one of the men who died. In the background are all the people who took part in raising the money. They were raising the money while the war was still going on, with the intention of putting it up. The monument, when it was put up, cost $2,576. It doesn't sound like a lot, but that would be the equivalent of about $35,000 today, which was a significant amount. The monument, to put it up itself, cost $2,000, and the other $576 the committee gave to the American Legion to help them to keep up the monument, to take care of it. This was the monument in its early days. After there was the original World War II, World War I monument, and then this was the World War II monument that was put up over it. This listed the names of, I think there were about 12 or 13 who served in World War I, then 118 who served in World War II. This is the monument as if you go and visit it and you see it today. And so much of this has been done by the Civic Association. And on the side now, there are these smaller stones to commemorate those who fought in Vietnam, in Korea, in the Desert Storm, and in the wars that are going on now. And around here, these are figures representing the four armed services, and each holding a flag. So that's it. That's part two of Bohemia in 1940. Bohemia's population in 1940 was 700. It's around 11,000 now. Bohemia was mostly of Czech background in 1940. You have to look pretty far and dig pretty deep to find Czechs in Bohemia today. It was a great place to live in the 1940s. It's a great place to live today.
Thank you very much, Bishop Shaw. This is the second time I've heard this. I heard this when he presented it at the ANTS meeting, and you still learned something. About any of this? No?
Did anybody ever see the inside of the Episcopal Church? Was there anybody here ever in there?
No, the old one, the very
old
first
one.
one.
It was
The old
red velvet like.
The old church?
Yeah, a lot of red. And the seats were like a velvet or a soft cushion.
The very first one? You were in the very first one?
You weren't in that one?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. You said St. John's or St. Luke's?
St. Luke's.
Yeah, I was in that, the
St.
little one.
John's, the little church, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
St. Luke's, I was in it.
I think I got it mixed up. We do this all the time.
No, it was locked up, it wasn't used, but I was in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you talking about the church on Montauk Island?
I'm on to a Conway.
The little Episcopal
Church
Church
Street,
in Bohemia. It's not there anymore.
Our church. The one you were married in.
But I wasn't.
You got it?
No, you weren't married yet.
I wasn't married, no. Next door to the one we were married in. See what I mean? You got that,
We're on
right?
the same page.
Yeah, same page. Where's Cliff? He's in the same thing. Here's another one.
But I was in it.
All right. It was a great place to grow up. I can, yes.
In the old St. Luke's Church, the old church,
That's Robert Turner.
Mr. Swanda made the altar.
In the new church.
In the very old church.
And in the new church also.
Yeah, I remember.
Yes,
He
yes.
did the old one.
Well, I don't know about the old one, but, I'm sure he probably did, but he did the work. Does anybody have any other questions or want to talk about anything before we move the coffee, Frank? If you have any questions about any of the displays or any of the things we're doing, please ask. Glad to show it. I'm going to tell you something. Some of these people who haven't been here weren't here. When we talked about we had Ashes here when we had the Suffolk County Historical Society. You should know that the cabinet in the back in the kitchen behind you there is from Bishop Wcela's grandmother's house, great-grandmother's house. His great-grandfather was a carpenter, correct? And he made that for his great-grandmother, and he remembers seeing it. And a lot about the monument and so on. We do have our tribute to the people who served. We just got a picture not too long ago from Millie Alexander, and that's her. She served. Oh, yes.
I'm curious about the names of the streets around here. I can only pronounce Julia Goldbach. The rest of them I can't. Are they famous people or people who
Oh,
live
P
here?
families, Karshik, Karshik Street.
Yes, I know that.
Okay, that's Karshik.
Yeah.
That's the Karshik family. Hubal? Or Hubal, we say Hubal. Okay, that was a family here, and they lived right at the end of Hubal Street. Kala, and who else?
Those are the other ones, I think.
Yeah,
Julia Goldbach,
I don't know.
all right, and Louis,
Kasut. Louis Kasut he's Hungarian. He was a Hungarian hero. He was named not by down here, but by the Hungarian folks I mentioned up in Lakeland. And of course, the street runs, well, it used to run all the way down. Of course, now Veterans Highway is in the way. But he was in the 19th century, he was a Hungarian patriot.
and what about the other one?
Shiraz.
Oh, I don't know.
If
anything
you
about
rise, I
that.
don't know if you
I
rise
don't know, I
either.
can't even pronounce it.
No, I don't know that. It's your eyes.
Those are all names, I think, mainly that came from up there. Because that section where they run in, that used to be called, everybody right around, it used to be called the squares. Because all there was woods. And it was called the squares because there were fire lines cut in. So that if there was a fire, the fire trucks would get in and kind of backfire and keep it down. The squares, right?
Squares.
Yes.
You all know the squares. Come on,
Just-
on up to it, on up to the squares.
Just one story about Hubal or Hubal Street. My grandfather and grandmother owned the property that Hubal Street is on now. And next to it was a family called Smolik, and Hubal was way down at the end. There was no road there. And they wanted to put a road in so that they could build on either side. Mr. Hubal would not give any land, or Mr. Smolik rather, would not give any land to it. So when they built the road, they put it so that there was 2 foot of my grandparents' property on the other side of the road, so that he would not have access to the road. They dealt with each other that way. So ever since then, now it's all taken care of. But after that, every time somebody wanted to build on Hubal Street, they had to take care of that 2 feet somehow to get it into their property because it belonged across the street on the other side.
On a more serious note, I'd like to introduce Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, sitting in the back, of the famous Johnson family. Now, that was your brother, correct? That was... Excuse me?
Yeah, that was his.
That was your brother? Yes, that we spoke about before. And, yeah. And we're glad that they're here with us. They're members of the society and come very often, unless they're visiting children and grandchildren. We ready, Laurie?
Ready.
We're ready. Oh, wait.
I just want to say, the VFW has always put a wreath on Johnson Avenue. Not only the one in town in Sable, but we honor Jonathan, Carl Johnson, because he was the first vet to die in Pearl Harbor.
Yes,
And so we honor that memorial right there.
that's very
We
nice.
put a wreath right there.
That's
on
very
Memorial
nice.
Day.
Very nice. Very important. Very important that we remember. Never forget.